All right, joining us from Capitol Hill is the man who will be tasked with bringing tax reform across the finish line in the House, Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas. He's Deputy Whip and Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Good to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. The president calls his tax plan a middle-class miracle. Tell us how it is that.
Yeah, so for families, it's really important. So first, we flatten out the brackets and lower the rates for every American so they can keep more of what they earn. Really importantly, we protect more of the first dollars that families earn. That's really, we double the standard deduction, really helpful for young families starting out, middle-class families sort of pinching every penny, and retirees as well. And then, of course, growing jobs in the local community in a major way is how you help every paycheck get bigger. That's important too for families.
But how exactly, like, what are the middle class tangibly seeing?
Yeah, so lower tax rates, as I said, so they can keep more of their money. By doubling standard deduction, we protect more of their dollars from being taxed at all. And as you know, we take the 10% bracket and make it zero, so incredibly important for modest earning families as well.
So that seems very different, Steve Rattner, from what you said earlier when I asked you how the middle class fared in this. You said they got basically nothing.
Congressman, as you know, probably know, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget came out yesterday, and they're a nonpartisan group with their analysis of this, and they found that for individuals as a whole, there was actually a tax increase based on what we know so far of about $300 billion over the next 10 years. Just to pick on
they're
one.
They're wrong.
Excuse me?
They're wrong, if I could, Steve. So look, they're not really looking at both the brackets, which have yet to be filled in, haven't figured in the doubling of the standard deduction. No objective analysis of this does anything but recognize lower taxes for every income level, which is exactly why we're doing this tax reform.
Well, I don't want to get too deeply into the weeds, but when you double the standard deduction, you also eliminate the exemptions that people get to take for dependents and things like that. And so for people, particularly larger families, the doubling of the standard deduction doesn't help at all. But let me ask you about a second thing.
But that isn't true because we increased the child tax credit. So, your example, families with kids actually save more money than they do today.
Let me ask you about a second piece of the analysis, which is the debt. That essentially this becomes a $5.8 trillion gross tax cut and probably about a $2.2 trillion net tax cut. It would take our debt to a greater share of our economy, greater than 100% share of our economy, for the first time since World War II. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, again, not right. One, these are significant tax cuts for our local small businesses, for middle-class families to get this economy going, because we know what we have for a tax code now isn't working. But what isn't being analyzed is that, one, we get strong economic growth, as we did with President Kennedy and President Reagan working with Democrats on tax reform, but also we are, just as we're proposing this simpler, fair postcard-style system, we're proposing to eliminate a lot of special interest provisions, deductions, and loopholes so we can lower those tax rates for everyone. So we want tax reform to move us toward a balanced budget. We do that through growth and eliminating a lot of loopholes.
Well, as you know, other tax cuts have not really produced growth. President Bush's tax cuts in 2001, 2003 really did. And a lot of economists think that stimulating the economy when we have relatively low unemployment doesn't really produce growth. It potentially even produces inflation. And the Senate, of course, has decided they want to limit the size of these tax cuts to $1.5 trillion. The House wants them to be deficit neutral. So you still have a lot of work to do, don't you, to get it to fit into those frameworks?
Here's where you're right. We have more work to do, and I'm pretty proud about the fact that now this is pretty historical after 31 years. We have a White House, we have a president, a House and Senate coming together to deliver tax reform to the American people. What we know isn't working is the current tax code. Look, we're struggling in this 2% economic growth for as far as the economists can see. That will not work. We're still having jobs moving overseas, not just jobs, research, headquarters, manufacturing. So by becoming competitive again, by simplifying and making the tax code fair, by actually growing paychecks, which Americans haven't seen in an awful long time, maybe that's why almost 9 out of 10 Americans want Congress to act on tax reform, and most want their lawmaker to work with President Trump to get it done.
All right, Congressman Kevin Brady, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, in the wake of Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico's governor is asking the White House to temporarily waive the Jones Act. The 1920 law prohibits tankers from hauling crude oil between U.S. ports unless those vessels are American-made, and some lawmakers argue it is worsening the recovery efforts in Puerto Rico. We'll talk to the island's governor next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.